Welcome to Dialing Home, where we are celebrating Stargate in all of its incarnations. Mr. Joseph Mallozzi, Stargate SG-1, we're celebrating the 20th anniversary this year.
Yep.
What is it like just thinking of that? That this is still a thing 20 years later?
It was crazy back then just because, when Paul and I joined the franchise, really it was just SG-1 at the time. It was season 4 and we were told, it'll go, fifth season and then everybody can go their separate ways. And we're like, great. And so we joined in season 4 and we did a 5th season. And then Brad came into our office one day and was like, hey, we might be doing a 6th season. So we thought like, great, 6th season, we'll do the 6th season, we'll wrap it up and then we'll move on. And then we got the 7th season, then the 8th season. And once we hit the 10th season, by the way, every season I thought,
that was it.
That was it. We're done. And so we kind of wrote a season finale that could work as a series finale, and we kept on coming back until the 10th season, which was the year I thought for sure, and I blame Chris Judge because he convinced me. He was like, "There's no way they're going to cancel us. They need SG-1 in order to, do Atlantis." And I thought that makes perfect sense. And of course, we were canceled. That was the year. But even back then, 10 years, I thought, "Wow, how amazing is this?" And then we did all the spin-offs. We did Atlantis. We did Universe. I'm just amazed how the fandom is still, should I say fervent is a good word? Remains
and
passionate.
Electrified.
Yes, not just about kind of the idea of the Stargate in general, but those characters, O'Neill and Daniel and Sam and teal'c and all the other characters that came since. It's really a testament to the cast and the crew and everyone who built that world.
And gave it life. They keep connecting with audiences. There's something persistent about this mythology. And I want to get to that in a second. But first, I want to go way back. How did you first discover that you wanted to write for television? Was there a tipping point? Was there a pivot point?
You know what?
How old were you?
I grew up, I was a huge sci-fi fan, comic books and sci-fi. My mother would get me comic books and sci-fi, and Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov to read, and Harlan Ellison because she loved the fact that I enjoyed reading. And I would have told my mother, I want to be a writer, and my mother was like, well, writing is something that people don't really do for a living. You become a lawyer and maybe you can write on the side. And actually, I wrote a novel. It was a terrible novel, and my longtime writing partner, producing partner Paul Mully read it and said, "This is a terrible novel, but it would really make a good film script." And actually, I went out and I learned the formatting of a proper screenplay, and so I adapted my terrible novel into an equally terrible screenplay. But that was actually my door in, and so from there, I actually got my start in animation and worked my way up to live action, and then 1 hour action adventure, and then ended up on Stargate. And to be honest with you, it was a show that I didn't watch because I saw an episode called Emancipation, which has been rated
actually. Was that your introduction?
Yes, it was one of the worst episodes Stargate ever produced. And I remember watching it and thinking, oh my God, I can't do this. And then our agent, who was Robert Cooper's agent at the time, said, well, they're looking for writers. And I was like, I don't know if the show is for me. And it was like, well, read the scripts. And we ended up reading the scripts, some of the scripts that had been written for season 3, and they were quite good. And so we pitched, and we ended up landing a gig, and one of our first scripts was an episode called Scorched Earth, and then our second one was Window of Opportunity, which was
I don't know anything
such a
about
blast.
that one.
Yeah, it was a little known
I've never
episode.
heard of that.
Yeah. I feel as though my career has come full circle because Window of Opportunity is the time loop episode I wrote. At the beginning of my really television writing career, and then. I just finished up on Dark Matter, and one of the, a fan favorite was another time loop episode that I drew on Window of Opportunity for inspiration. And so basically I begin my career with a time loop episode, and I end my career with a time loop episode. Presently. Well, who knows what the future holds?
Exactly.
Right, yeah. Thank you for that.
Was Emancipation your first exposure to Stargate? Had you seen the movie?
I had seen the movie. I remember actually Paul calling me up and saying, have you read about the Stargate movie? And I was like, no. And I looked it up, and it was rated a bomb.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my, this is terrible. And Paul and I used to have a bad movie night. We saw like Bruce Willis' Color of Night and Barbed Wire and Boxing Helena and Battlefield Earth, which basically retired the trophy.
Yeah.
But we were like, we should check out Stargate, and I did, and I was surprised. I was like, this is actually quite good. And
Is
very
SG-1 filming at
intriguing.
this point, or is
No, this is
before?
This is before. This is before, and then it was like, I assume many years later that I happened across the TV series, which, unfortunately, like I said, I saw an episode that was not the best representation of what the show could be about, but ultimately, I fell in love with the show, and Paul and I joined in season 4, and we spent 12 glorious years on the franchise. Crazy.
Are there any specific moments over those 12 seasons that really stand out to you when you're looking at it back from this far, 20 years later, after it started for everybody?
Yeah.
Is there anything that stands out to you as being, that was the most adventurous time of my career at that point, or that was so hard, I'm so glad we don't have to do that again?
To be honest with you, I think back, and I think Stargate was very special. Paul and I were fortunate to join in the 4th season, and at that point they had kind of worked out the bugs. And I remember we were looking to cast someone for a guest role at one point. We were all sitting in Brad's office. It was Paul, Brad, Robert Cooper, and myself, and we were going through the list of possible actors. There was one actor who I recognized, and I was like, oh, he's quite good. And Brad said, LTS. And I was like, LTS? What's LTS? And he said, life's too short. And that was kind of a mantra that he established, he and Rob established very early on, that really, I think, encapsulated the vibe on Stargate. If you were a jerk, if you were, kind of arrogant, if you were unpleasant to work with, you wouldn't be sticking around for long. And which is why it was such a pleasant experience coming to set. It was always very hard, it was always very challenging, but the cast and crew became like family, whether it was SG-1 or Atlantis or Stargate Universe, which made the end so hard.
Yeah.
When you mentioned moments that stand out, and for me, the moments that stand out were those endings, whether it was SG-1, as I said, finding out at the 10th anniversary. And it was like a huge party, and they were giving out these kind of memorial booklets and
celebration of 10 years.
And the president of MGM came up and gave a speech and said, well, unfortunately, this is the last year of the show, and there was a smattering of applause, and people continued drinking and talking. What? And I remember turning to Paul, my writing partner Paul, and going, were we canceled? And it turned out that we were canceled. So that was how we found out that SG-1 was not coming back, which kind of surprised me because, as I said, we joined in season 4, and each year seemed like it would be the last until the last one, where I was very confident we were coming back, and then we didn't.
Because you were going to a movie. I remember season 5. We've knocked off practically all the Tolan are ashes. The Asgard may die off here. They're clearly setting up something else.
And Rob and Brad had in mind to actually do a spin-off a couple of years earlier. They wanted to do a spin-off called Stargate Command. But for some reason, the idea being, I think there was a reluctance to part from the SG-1
the branding
model. And so, fans will notice that seasons 9 and 10 are very different from season 8, the preceding season, and I think 9 and 10 would have been the spin-off. But in the end, we ended up using the SG-1 structure, the SG-1 characters, but we just brought in 2 new characters, played by Ben Browder and Claudia Black. I was a huge fan of Farscape, so
there you go.
I kind of lobbied hard for them, and they were fantastic.
What about Atlantis? How did Atlantis reinvigorate the property? Sets you in a new galaxy, more action-oriented, little nuttier characters, bantering, scientists. Fresh new villains, totally different galaxy. A different vibe.
Yeah, different vibe. One of the things that I've always said is a lesson I learned in Stargate is that viewers will tune in for the hook, but they stay for the characters. And the characters are like, a family to them. And so SG-1 very much is like 4 or 5 person unit was, a family that they checked out every week. In much the same way, the Atlantis expedition was like a larger family, but, the characters were very, colorful and fun and sort of unique in their own way. And, we did a couple of different things. In the beginning, they were cut off from Earth, which is something I liked. And then, in ensuing seasons, they were able to sort of contact Earth and move back and forth, which I didn't like as much.
Midway station, you blow the thing up.
Yes, but in all fairness, I take some responsibility for that, because I was talking about like creating a gate network, and Bride was like, actually, that's a really good idea, and so we did it, and then when we did it, we were like, okay, now we got to get rid of it. Yeah.
Right. Wow. And then Universe comes along after Atlantis gets canceled.
Yeah.
You guys took it tonally in a very different direction, where you're focusing really on the characters.
Yes.
So was it in hindsight, with there being 2 seasons of that show, is that something that you guys would have sped up a little bit more in the beginning? Do you think it grew proportionally,
It's easy to Monday morning quarterback, but a couple of things that I think I would have probably done differently, or suggested we do differently, is, I guess, infuse more of the humor that was such a staple in the first 2 shows.
Now that is one sweet potato.
Really?
Everybody try it, dig it.
Oh my God.
All right, good, but you stick.
Potentially, yes, kind of accelerate the stories. I regret the fact that, unlike in the case of SG-1 and Atlantis, where we were able to produce essentially 40 episodes of television a year and have SG-1 ultimately hand off the torch to Stargate Atlantis, that's something that we didn't have the opportunity to do with Stargate Universe, which I think was a huge mistake. I think if we'd been able to do that and run Atlantis for even one more season and help launch Stargate Universe, it just would have gone a long way towards, I think allowing the fans to sort of, come on board. Because I know there was that reluctance, just because, as you said, tonally it was very different. And quite frankly, the fact that Atlantis ended and Stargate Universe started right on its heels gave the impression that we were canceling one for the other, which wasn't true. I mean, to be honest with you, I've been very explicit in my blog about how I, contacted the president of MGM and said, hey, is there a possibility for us to come back for another season? He said, yes, and unfortunately it didn't happen, but
Atlantis had a good run.
It had, 5 years is a great run. Yeah.
And the fact of the matter for Universe, those characters are pretty much fully formed in those first 3 episodes.
Yep.
That was one of the most amazing things about watching them, is that they're off to the races, and through the next 2 seasons, very little, changes.
Yep.
So it fits well.
Yeah. Brad and Robert had a definite game plan. I mean, they went out, they pitched it, and I think they were cognizant of the fact that the universe was so tonally different from the preceding shows that they wanted to do something a little different. In fact, they wanted to, I think they basically wanted to pitch it without Stargate in the title. And they were told, no, you have to have Stargate in the title. And I think Robert, they were asking, what's the series called? And Robert, off the top of his head, was like, I don't know, Stargate Universe. And they're like, that's great.
Oh, and it's stuck.
And so it stuck. and that's how, we got Stargate Universe.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about all 3 of them with you over some lunch. So
awesome.
Let's get some lunch and meet up for more.
Excellent.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.